Welcome to our first episode and to our CRYENGINE Summer Academy. Some of you who followed our Twitch streams might remember this. I am Roman, by the way, and the Junior Technical Evangelist. We made a magnificent project called Breeze and introduced some parts and pieces of Breeze to you in the live streams. You play as a small robot dropped somewhere on a low-poly island where each and one of the game mechanics are introduced one at a time. The island is filled with marvelous low-poly assets and some platforming game mechanics you can enjoy. The main goal of this event was to introduce some of the concepts, tips, strategies employed in the making this project with resident experts in several different areas such as level design, animation, programming, audio design, and more. We thought we would create the first episode again for you, to act as the introduction to the upcoming series. Stay tuned for more and enjoy this episode for now. By the way, if you like what you see here already, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. Breeze is a tiny project, but a beautiful one. You appear to be stranded on a charming island. Your rocket is the only means of returning home, but it requires fuel. You must gather the required fuel so you can make your journey back home. Oh, and speaking of these stunning low-poly assets, we need to mention the awesome work of Tom Dierbeck, our principal 3D environment artist, the person who's responsible for a lot of the impressive vegetation in Crysis, a game you might heard about. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We will talk in a later episode to Tom directly on how he created the assets and what to pay attention to when you do low-poly assets. So, the island was already there, but we needed to add some elements to make it a game. We decided we needed an end goal, an objective, so we thought we would add a rocket, a pretty and massive object in the distance. But apart from that, we also needed some gameplay elements. Platforms that can move around and drop you when you jump on them, and all the gameplay-related building blocks that help to shape our world. With game mechanics in mind, let me introduce our first guest of this series, Matthias Otto, our principal level designer. The main reason Climb exists and is one of the best-selling games on the Oculus Store, and one of my favorite games on the Oculus Rift headsets in general. He's the one who creates gameplay prototypes as fast as the speed of light. So, hey Matto.
Hello. Yeah, I'm Matthias Otto, a principal level designer now for quite some time at Crytek. And so, what is the first question?
So the thing is, as I've already mentioned, that you are the master of prototypes, in my opinion, because you are the one who creates like the fastest prototypes of everything. So my question would be, what do you actually like to use when you prototype a game mechanic?
So the important thing for creating new mechanics is always a visual scripting language. You need to have a tool set which you can craft with, something basically like a sandbox, something you can play in and try things out. And you need a visual scripting tool like right away. I don't see how it's possible to create mechanics without that. Like, no, barely. You need to have a tool where you can do all the calculations, all the math operations, the vector stuff, and the more an engine has to offer here, the better. Like something you can play with. The more access you have, the better. If there's some existing things already, that always helps. Like if you have a game already in place, something you can take and then manipulate, that's always very helpful. Like starting with from scratch is always a lot more difficult because you might have to build some ground, some underlying features first, and that always is a bit time consuming.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Yeah,
exactly.
So you definitely need like a tool where you can, start your your first game mechanics with. So what tool exactly do you use in CRYENGINE, for example?
Yeah, so for previous projects, a lot of Flowgraph was used. Flowgraph was the main scripting tool. It's still super powerful. It's still used in many of the games we do right now. But we use more and more the new visual scripting tool where we can create entities with. So with the new Visual Script, we have a lot more access to systems we haven't had access to with Flowgraph. And that's amazing. It offers it's going to be more flexible. We will be able to do more things, more crazy things that were not possible with Flowgraph before. And yeah, that's basically where I'm mostly digging in, and then where I mostly spend my time. But usually, you also need some objects to play with, so some shapes, and that's where also the CryDesigner, for example, is some very helpful tool, because I don't know, maybe you want to create some items and you need to define the size and the shape of an item, and you can already create like, okay, we need a weapon, and a weapon or a rifle is something long, and a pistol might be something smaller, and you create shapes, base shapes. You can maybe put in the level or somewhere already and see, does it work? Is the size big enough? Do I identify the object or the item I want to have a mechanic with? And yeah, that's where the CryDesigner, so a tool where you can just craft a bit of primitive geometries. You can actually go into more complex shapes with it as well, but at some point you should go visual to like Max or Maya or whatever, or Blender. But that's always a great starting point to create new mechanics. Have some boxes,
Yeah, definitely.
circles, whatever you need.
I also can agree, like, the designer tool is one of my favorite tools in the engine that we currently have. It's just so easy to create walls, houses, buildings that you can run up to and something, and then create your first prototypes with the game mechanics that you want to have. But speaking of which, how do you actually, like, for example, you're sitting there and you want to create a new game. You want to create a new platformer, for example, or a jump and run game, which was, I think, kind of fairly the same. But how do you come up with a game mechanic? What are your train of thoughts whenever you create a game mechanic? What do you think of, and how do you realize it in the end? Well, how do you realize, we already answered, but how do you come up with a game mechanic?
So there's always, the first thing is, what is the purpose of the mechanic? I mean, is it about resource management? Is it about navigation, like walking, climbing, sliding? Is it combat? Do you need to like, I don't know, fight with, have a specific weapon or an item that you can control enemies with? It's always like, what is the purpose? What game is it you're doing? And for example, yeah, if it's a platformer, it could be something like objects you stand on, collapsing objects. That's classic. Like a platformer, you have surfaces that collapse after a certain amount of time, or you have rotating platforms, and these are obviously things that are already existing. So, but and to come up with something new, that's a difficult part. I mean, that's the creative part. And then there's also the universe or the theme the game has. That's important. Is it grounded in reality, or is it sci-fi or magic? Can you go out of bounds and try anything you want? Are there any limits with that? So all of that have to be considered, and yeah, it's all of these things in the end, they come together.
and I think this ties perfectly together with the next question is, so what do you pay attention to if you come up with a game mechanic? And I think you have to limit yourself, right? For example, in a universe that or in the world that you are building your gameplay element with.
Yeah, I think an important thing for game mechanics is always they have to be easily to understand to the player. The controls have to be intuitive. That's like super important to not like have a hard time to get into the mechanic, because I don't know, you want to jump, but the jump button doesn't work because you are not standing on flat ground or something. It just has to work. It has to be intuitive. You can't put suddenly something like a jump on a button that people wouldn't then expect. Like that's a stupid example. Jump is but because usually that's not a very new mechanic. But any other mechanic, it has to be. It even has to fit to the controller. Like where would you put a mechanic on a controller? Like what do you do with it? And does it fit even with a controller you hold in the hand or whatever? It can be. It has to. The best thing is if it comes intuitively. Like in the climb, it was like grabbing. Is just we put it on the finger, on the index finger, and it just because we started with the Xbox controller at first, and there we used the trigger buttons, which also had which are like which have a trigger range, and you get some sort of feedback from it, like a force that pushes back. That's better than any click button. Like we could have used the shoulder buttons, but they are just clicking, and that's very not what you would expect from an interaction with an object in the world. That's
you want to have that feedback.
Yeah. So, for example, that. I mean, but yeah. So, what else do I pay attention to? I mean, there's always the need for satisfaction. I mean, if a mechanic is satisfying, that's just it's one thing for the need of a mechanic. Like I don't know, you have to create a mechanic that you can climb somewhere up, like a rope or so. But it has to be also cool to the player to use it. There has to be some sort of satisfaction in it, and also maybe it needs to show some sort of progress. Like it can't be just flat. It's hard to explain.
But I think people will get it.
It's I don't know. For example, in Robinson we had the collection mechanic. You absorbed some sort of when you were scanning plants and animals, you absorbed some sort of particles from the objects. And I think I had a vacuum cleaner in mind. It's literally that simple. Like, do you know how satisfying it is to have a very dusty ground and you have a vacuum cleaner and you see like all the dust and little objects just being sucked in by a vacuum cleaner? It's a satisfying thing to do that. And that was something I knew. This could be interesting. How do I put this into a mechanic? Yeah, I'm collecting stuff from this item, and I want to have it feeling like a vacuum cleaner. It wasn't a vacuum cleaner, but I just knew I want to have that feeling.
That satisfaction of something. I think I even saw like a digital 3D GIF of something like a vacuum cleaner sucking up marbles, I think. And it was a really satisfying experience only to watch it. And I think I know where you're heading with this, to achieve that same satisfaction of this effect, right?
Exactly. I mean, yeah, it's for every mechanic you build, it's gonna be completely different. I mean, it's super interesting topic. You can talk about it forever.
Yeah, I think so, but I think it will definitely burst our current budget here on time. But I think we should do a podcast with you. That would be awesome.
We should.
So what are your top tips for creating a mechanic?
So yeah, what are the top tips? So it's always good to have experience with many games, with specifically the games you want to build something in, to have like an understanding what is out there already. It's always great to know movies as well, to get some sort of creative input. It's great to have also maybe some interesting real world experiences, something where you can even take ideas from, like something that thrills you, something like, I don't know, flying a plane is probably gives you a thrill. So what is it that makes that thrill, or like height. If you're standing on a high platform and you have the thrill of height, is that something you can use in a game? So any sort of real world experience that gives you something could be something leverageable for games or mechanics. It's hard to describe, but sometimes you just get an idea not in the place where you like, not in the you're making a game, you're sitting in front of the PC, and this might not be the place where you come up with the idea in the end. It might be somewhere completely different. I don't know, you're dropping a stone in water, and suddenly, hey, why don't we make a game where you can flip a stone on water? Skipping, I think it's called skipping.
Yeah, skipping. Yeah.
And like in real life, it's the satisfaction is like, how many times does the stone flip on the water? And that is a mechanic in itself. Like, have a score of how many times you can skip a rock on water. It's just as an idea. These things, they yeah.
I think I know where you're getting at, because this is actually a perfect segue to the next question would be, how do you become better at gameplay design? And I think you already mentioned it, that to observe everything that happens outside the world, that gives you this high or this satisfaction, or this enticement, also, this excitement, to put it in better words, this excitement of something is really happening. Like, for example, standing on something high. I think that's what would you suggest to for example, I am really like just a beginner on gameplay design. I know how to do just jumpings, and I think, oh, that's fun, but how do I actually become better to get like on a higher level of understanding gameplay design and doing gameplay design?
Yeah, super tough question.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think the best thing is always learning by doing, failing and succeeding. Like, sometimes you think, okay, this I don't know, if you have created a jump and run and you have a jump mechanic, then first thing is the current mechanic, the way you've built it, can it be better? How in what way can it be better? And the best thing is, do something crazy. I don't know, remove gravity, half gravity, suddenly you jump twice as high. What if you increase gravity? Does it still feel good? Or what if you change something, like the jump is not an initial impulse, it's more like you apply velocity over a given amount of time. Like, you hold the jump button, and as long as you hold it, you give a bit of more impulse. So that's many games are doing. This is like this subconscious thing of, you can actually jump higher by holding the button, but if you just press it quickly, you also make a smaller jump. And that's super intuitive. It's something most of the time you don't need to explain a player. He will figure it out immediately, or he will figure it out on the get-go. And it's something that comes out of your hand. Like, if you want to do something stronger, you press the button stronger, and you can already leverage this, or you press the button longer. But yeah, there are probably also tons of books out there that people can read. I personally did never read any design book, so it all came from just playing games, trying things myself. But I bet there's there's great stuff out there.
I bet so.
You can learn from. It's always great to also know the limits. Like, that's more like, understanding if you want to create a mechanic, like, are you even able to do it? Like, it could be something where you need to, I don't know, maybe you want to do something which makes the screen go inverted. And that is maybe rendering, and rendering you just don't have access to. So I don't know, is that I mean, it doesn't have to be a bad thing, but it's always good to have to know that you're capable of doing something, like to understand that nothing in the software you have will block you from doing something. So if you know the tool set, the more you know it, the better you can later on understand and estimate, is it possible to create the mechanic I'm looking for? That's always super, super important to know that.
Yeah. So,
But it's all better. It can be the other way around as well. If you create something and in the end you notice, damn it, there's a limit, and I haven't thought about it in the first get-go. But that's always like, that's how you learn. That's how you experience.
But I think that's
better.
also like a really good, learning process. And as you have already mentioned, I think failing and learning from that experience is also quite important to a process of becoming a better gameplay designer.
Exactly.
So yeah, thank you for your time. That was really awesome, and that was quite informative. I think people will appreciate this. And if you have further questions, guys, just comment it down in the comments below. Thank you for your time.
Yes, Roman. Thanks for having me.
That was awesome. Thank you. So to create all those game mechanics, as we already mentioned, we need to have a tool that actually create gameplay assets for prototyping, like trees, bushes, platforms, houses, and all the things that you can think of. And you can create all those things by simply using the designer tool. We used it to create every and each of the platforms you see on the island, including the rocket and the wall of rocks that you can see in this example here. Creating prototype assets with the designer tool is fairly simple. You create a box, you create a sphere, start to expanding with the tool of your imagination and of course the range of the designer tool. You can select each polygon or a vertex and you can extrapolate it, you can expand it, you can make it bigger, or you can move it wherever you want it to be able to create the object that you want to create. You can extrude those polygons, you can extrude multiple of them, you can extrude an edge or create an offset. You can wield the object and pretty much everything that you can think of. And I think I praised the designer tool enough now, so let's continue with something else. We have to talk about the things that can actually breathe a little bit of life into your project, or to give your island, or our island, the actual breeze. Apart from the sound of breeze, of course, that's something for a different episode. But particles are one of the parts of the engine that are simply so much fun to create and experiment with. Starting from a preset that you can choose and expand that to something so complex and awesome that you will get the official position in a company as an explosion artist. Speaking of which, in the later episodes, Victor Ickes, veteran cinematic artist for Crytek and our very own explosion artist, will show you how to make a cool particle effect, matching your art style and implementing them into your game in CryEngine. And to be honest, Victor's work was quite awesome for our Breeze project. He created the leaves falling off the trees, the wind and the fireflies. But not only the fireflies, there are dragonflies flying around and flies group that are maybe gathering around something stinky? I'm not sure here. But we also do have those amazing birds here that are flying around the island, which in my opinion, from the distance, they are looking so freaking cool. It makes this scene look a little bit epic in my opinion. So when you want to create birds on your island or on your level in your town, this is a pretty good example on how to do them. We also used Mixamo in this case, a web page that provides an automatic character rigging tool, pre-made characters and some awesome motion captured animations. And to be fair, a lot of them, which you then can simply attach or assign to your character and download the files. We used a pre-made character from Mixamo, simply because it's really good for prototyping. And it's a really good prototyping method. It's free and fast to integrate into the CryEngine. So we decided to use everything that Mixamo has to offer. And the last but not least element will be the mannequin setup. Character tool setup of footsteps, for example. Our audio team created footsteps for us and helped us to integrate those into the game, which was a fairly simple process. Adding those to our character and the actual footsteps, well, it was a breeze. But for that, we needed a proper blend space that helped to shape the animation of the character. Blend spaces are the accumulation of animations on a 3D grid, respectively to the character movement. So when you have a proper blend shape, you can use this single blend shape in a mannequin setup for simple locomotion. And are you hearing this? Ah, it's beautiful. the actual breeze that you can hear. Also, a few bugs here and there. One of the most vital parts of game development is audio, and CryEngine handles audio like no one else, which you can experience in Hunt Showdown. We will talk in a later episode about the soundscape designed for Tropical Island in FMOD Studio with some of our audio engineers, and I will leave it at that, and I really hope you are really hyped for the next episodes to come. This was an introduction episode, and you should be pretty hyped about the future episodes that are about to be released on this channel. And again, if you are curious on what we are actually creating and doing on our Twitch channel, just follow the link in the description and follow us for more. And if you're new here and you are just curious what's next, just subscribe to this channel to don't miss any future videos here. And as always, see you in the next episode. Bye bye.